Right, so I've been testing the M3 MacBook Air for a while now. I've been putting it through its paces and using it as my main machine, and honestly guys, this really feels like the perfect computer for most consumers, but you shouldn't buy this. And I'm sure you're a little confused by that statement, but let me explain. So I'll give you guys my conclusion up front. There is really nothing wrong with this MacBook Air. It's a fantastic machine. I can happily keep using it. I've been editing videos on it just fine, and it does everything I throw at it without breaking a sweat. But the biggest problem with this MacBook is the fact it's nothing special. This essentially is just an M2 MacBook Air with a slightly faster chipset, and so when that's considerably cheaper, it's hard to justify getting this. That's a rundown, but if you want my extended thoughts, let's get into the actual review. I've been mainly testing the 15-inch M3 by the way, since that's my favorite size option. I have already compared both the 13-inch and the 15-inch in a separate video that you can check out in the icon above, but personally guys, I love the extra real estate the 15-inch offers, since it feels a lot more spacious when multitasking. And talking about multitasking, let's get into the performance. M3 was already introduced with the MacBook Pro last year, and on paper it offers fancy specs like a 3nm process and ray tracing, wow, but it's just your usual year-over-year upgrade if I'm being honest, especially when comparing the benchmarks. M1 was fine for my use, so was M2, and now guess what? M3 is also perfectly fine. Now for those worried about these fanless Macs overheating or any thermal throttling issues in general, I'm happy to say that's not the case. I've been pushing this Mac by editing videos and making thumbnails on it every single day, and not once did this Mac struggle. Now yes, you could argue my content's pretty basic, and you might be right about that, but this is still a lot more intensive work for a MacBook Air than of course what most regular folks are going to do with these machines, so the fact I've had zero performance issues should tell you this machine is plenty powerful. Please do not worry about this being fanless. I've had the M1 MacBook Air since launch, which was nearly 4 years ago, and I've yet to have any performance issues. So yes, Apple's silicon honestly works like magic, guys. Especially for those in education and you're typing up documents and watching videos for the most part, then you should not worry one bit. The base M3 is plenty good enough and should be more than fine for long-term usage. Also, thank you Apple for rectifying the mistake they made with the M2 and giving us back the faster SSD with the base M3. It's very much appreciated. I will be honest, as I said in my M2 MacBook Air review, I didn't notice a massive difference with the overall functionality of the machine because of the single NAND SSD, but hey, I'm not gonna complain about Apple giving us a better product. That's always a huge win. But what really floored me with the base M3 MacBook Air I've been testing is how usable 8 gigs of RAM was. I originally got the M1 Air with 16 gigs in case the 8 gigs was not sufficient, but surprisingly, I've yet to have a pop-up on this saying I've run out of RAM, and there's been no issues with the memory swap as well. Now ideally, I still think you should get 16 gigs if possible, because whilst it won't make a huge difference now, it could be beneficial as the machine gets older, but of course, if you are on a tight budget, 8 gigs of RAM here is certainly usable, especially for those doing the basics like web browsing and emailing. Ray tracing I haven't been able to extensively test because I'm not a gamer, but hey, it's nice Apple's including this because it could help macOS become more of a gaming platform for those who care about gaming, but as of now, it doesn't make a big difference to most consumers. Also, Apple did kind of improve the external display situation with M3. It does now support 2 displays instead of 1 with the M2, but that's only with the laptop lid closed, so it's not that big of an upgrade if I'm being honest, but anyways, if you care about that, M3 offers this. Let's now move on to the design, and I must admit I was wrong to quickly dismiss the new design language that was originally introduced to the MacBook Air with the M2 refresh. I was pretty salty about the lack of a wedge, but only after interacting with this Mac in person, I've come to appreciate the thinner chassis. I do also like the softer corners because the M1 Air and basically all 2016 era MacBooks have very sharp corners, which are very easy to scratch and dent, but that's no longer the case, and I like that. You know what else I would like? For you to click that subscribe button, of course. I would greatly appreciate it, and would bring you the latest about the world of Apple right to your subscription box, so please consider it. It would be appreciated. We're trying to hit our next milestone of 16,000 subscribers, so join the Saranbyte gang now. Obviously, the M3 comes in the same 4 color choices M2 had, and whilst everyone's still likely gonna go gaga for midnight, I much prefer the classic silver. Also, Apple claims midnight this year is more smudge resistant, but based on other people's reviews, that doesn't seem to be the case. So honestly, just make the smart move and go with silver, guys. It will age beautifully, trust me. And overall, it's pretty crazy this is a near 2-year-old design because it still feels pretty fresh for the most part. I'm not mad Apple recycled the same design for the M3 model because it does look modern. Moving on to the display, this essentially has the same panel Apple's been using on Macs for years. In fact, apart from the notch, which by the way has never bothered me, and also the high brightness, which I don't particularly care about because I'm using this indoors 99% of the time, this is essentially the same LCD panel the M1 MacBook Air has, as well as every other MacBook since around 2015. Now that might sound like a bad thing, but Apple really nailed the displays on their Macs early on, so as a result, this is still a fantastic panel. Yes, it lacks some fancy features like mini LED and 120Hz the MacBook Pros offer, but I can personally look past that, and I still enjoy watching YouTube videos, movies, and TV shows on this machine. Now the M3 MacBook Air shares the same exact webcam as most modern Macs. It's 1080p and does the job for the most part, but I will say you're likely better off using continuity camera because the quality your iPhone produces is much better. Audio and mic-wise though, this Mac is excellent. I've really enjoyed streaming Spotify on this MacBook with the speakers. It's crazy how good they sound when they're not even front-firing, they're actually tucked behind the hinge. And actually, one of the few advantages the bigger size has is that it packs 2 more speakers inside its casing over the 13-inch, and it does make a massive difference, so that's another reason you should go with a bigger size. Anyways, I've also been told by friends I sound crisp and clear with these mics when I do the occasional Discord call on this, and here's a sample for you guys. And here's a webcam test for you guys. I should sound pretty good. The visuals should be decent enough. So yeah, let me know how this is. The keyboard is also fantastic, and oh my god, is this trackpad perfection. Every time I use a Mac, I come to appreciate how incredible Apple's trackpads are, because when I used to use Windows laptops, I know that was a tough period in my life, that was the one thing that sucked in all of them, and it seems Apple is the only manufacturer who can nail this part of the experience. Touch ID has also been reliable, and the ports on this have been a game changer for me, and that's because of MagSafe. Now, it's not actually to do with the fast charging or the fact it gives you a very satisfying magnetic connection that easily comes off, but it's more to do with the fact I now essentially have another port. You see, with the older M1 MacBook Air I still use on a daily basis, I would have to use one USB-C port for charging, and so for the peripherals that connect to my Mac, they only had access to one port, which was fine, but mildly frustrating at times. Now though, I have 2 ports because when I'm charging, I can use MagSafe instead, and I do greatly appreciate that. The battery life is also something I greatly appreciate with the M3. I was editing videos on this for 2 hours, and I only lost 13% of charge, which still blows my mind. This does offer the same battery life as the M2 and the M1, but again, for reference, my Intel MacBook Pro would be close to dead once I finish editing for 2 hours, and so it still blows my mind how good Apple Silicon is. They last forever, and the battery life should impress everyone. Finally, Apple has updated the connectivity with the M3. This offers Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.3 supports, but honestly, it does not make a huge difference. Yes, it's nice to have these new specs, but it's not going to give you that much faster Wi-Fi speeds or much better Bluetooth reliability. It's basically the same as the M2 in this aspect. So those are all my thoughts regarding the M3 MacBook Air, and as I said, this is a very good machine, and you would be happy using this, but ultimately everything comes down to pricing, and let me illustrate why I don't think this is great value. So yes, if you buy from Apple directly, you could argue the extra $100 for the MacBook Air M3 over the M2 can be justified. You're getting the newer chipset, better external display support, as well as the faster SSD, so that all adds up, right? Well, sorta, you could argue that, but ultimately do remember, guys, if you shop around, you will undoubtedly find the very similar M2 MacBook Air for much less. I've seen the M2 Air go for $899 in the US brand new, and of course, it can be found for even less if you're willing to buy refurbished, and I would consider Apple Refurb because their products are basically brand new, and I'll leave a link to my experience with Apple Refurbished in the icon above. But even here in the UK, I've noticed the M2 Air is considerably less, and so it's a no-brainer to go with the older Mac that's 95% identical to the brand new M3. Because for the average consumer buying these machines, the M2 will do everything you need without any issues, and you likely won't notice the advantages of the newer chipset. And honestly, I could also recommend the M1 MacBook Air, because whilst Apple does not sell that anymore, you can still find it through third parties. I've seen it in the US brand new for $699, which is an incredible deal, but also here in the UK it's around £750. So if you can put up with the older design, which honestly is not a massive compromise, you can save a lot and get a very similar fundamental experience. For the basics, M1 offers the same great benefits of M3, it's just a bit slow on paper, but to be honest, most won't care or even notice that. Now again, let me emphasize, the M3 is still a great machine, and if you can get a good discount in it, then of course, go ahead and buy it. But if you're considering getting it for retail price, there are much better options and much better Macs for most consumers. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and thank you for watching.